Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of the podcast, Master Random the podcast. This episode, before I get to the sponsorships, please leave a rating and review of the podcast or of this episode if you are listening to this on the Apple Podcast app. It really helps with being seen on the charts, stuff like that. Thank you if you could do that. Now, this episode is brought to you by Addis Mortuary. They are a small family-owned and operated mortuary that has been serving the local community for over 45 years, providing the top-of-the-line funeral and cremation services during a time when it is absolutely needed the most. Let's face it, we're all going to face this time in our lives, even ourselves. Why not make it the best services you can possibly get here on this island? And with Addis Mortuary, you can get services and plans by contacting them, or get more information on services and plans by contacting them at 477-1311, or visit the mortuary on South Route 4 in Sinania, Guam. As I said Guam like you're not here. Just go up towards Sinania, go down towards Chowit, Ordit. As you're going towards Ordit, on your left-hand side at the bottom of the hill, it's there. Totally Guam directions, but you know what I mean if you know what I mean, right? If you know, you know. They are big enough to serve, yet small enough to care. My next guests with an S, are Gilayna Santos and Akina Chargualaf, and they are the hosts of the podcast Dear Gorgeous Letters. It's a very, very, very interesting concept that they're using with the podcast, and it just shows the versatility of what you can do. And go listen to them. They're over on PodBean and working on getting onto other podcast directories. I feel like it was an awesome conversation, and I hope that you feel so too. So, without further ado, enjoy my conversation with Gilayna and Akina on Master Random. Check it out. Shoot, we're good. Ready. And welcome to the podcast, ladies.
Hello.
I'm excited for this because I feel like you guys have now joined the community and starting your podcast. And I mentioned earlier, the community is something that I want to see grow.
Definitely.
Yeah, when I saw this, when I started this, I was literally like, I felt alone. There's no one I can talk to. And as far as like doing a podcast, or what's the best way to do it, or what's the right direction. And I found it really, really, really hard. And then it became fun once I figured it out. That's why it took like 10 months for me to start it, right? But for you guys, it seems like this seems like I was listening to, a few of your episodes, and it seems like this is a journey that started sometime a couple years ago. And then Gilayna hit me up. She's like, hey, how can I come and see what you do? Can we talk and stuff? Like, fuck yeah, let's do it. So I guess, where does the journey for you guys' show come from, and how do you guys see it in it being so fresh? How do you guys see it evolving?
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, I've done it a million times, but we need to extend our appreciation to you. Like, thank you so much. I mean, when this was in the beginning stages, and the fact that you were so helpful and welcoming to offer any type of advice or anything like that was just amazing. I mean,
yeah, and you basically like pioneered this on island.
Yeah.
So
No, I don't. I mean, I don't like to think of it like that, because I'm sure like people have dabbled with podcasts before, but I like to think I've been the most consistent over the last few years, and I guess I can be proud of that, right?
191, 92 episode, this one? Yeah.
It's definitely a passion of yours for sure, and it's obvious, right?
Yeah, and when I first started, it wasn't really. It didn't start as that. It was like just for fun. Like, all right, let's see what this does.
Yeah.
Right. But I guess going back to what I was asking is, like, where does the journey start? Because I look at like podcasting as sort of a journey. Yeah. Because it's unfolded my mind, and I'm curious on like how it's begun to unfold you guys' mind, and I guess prior to starting and then starting stuff like that.
Shoot. I think Akina should start with.
Okay. So I believe our passion projects sometimes they stall for a couple months or years for a certain reason. So Dear Gorgeous actually was first formed in 2017, and what I had in my mind was I would interview inspirational women from around the world.
Like blogging style?
Blogging style, exactly. And connect them with a letter. Something was intriguing about a letter. But for some reason, that time I was living in Bali. And, there's a lot of factors going in. So I had to put my passion projects to the side. And I moved back in October last year. And that's when I met Gilayna. So, we grabbed coffee. We were talking about like what we're interested in.
And you had just moved back too, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's almost like divine timing.
Right.
Yeah, so we were talking about interest. She lived in the Bay. I went to school in the Bay. And I was telling her about Dear Gorgeous, the concept. And she was like, you know what? Actually, because my original concept was to connect with women from around the world. But she was saying that Guam didn't really have our platform was very limited in terms of representing Pacific Islander. And I felt the same thing about Asian in media.
Right.
So she was like, hey, why don't we actually, I'm really interested. And she was more passionate about it than I was at that point. She was like, let's do this. This is great. Like, our island needs it,
That's what you need, though.
That's what I needed, And
need someone to light the fire. Like, yeah, light this fire under your ass. Yeah. Let's do this shit.
And it was crazy. Like, when you love something so much that you kind of just want to protect it.
Yeah.
But because of that, it's been collecting dust for like a year or two.
Yeah, for sure.
So I saw so much potential in our partnership. And, I was like, she has genuine interests and she really cares about the message. And she was like, let's do a podcast and let's cater towards like our people, Growing up, I grew up in California. She grew up in California too. And there's a lot of things that we felt were missing in media. So that's how the collaboration started.
For sure. And that's the one thing that I did notice, especially in the first episode when you guys were sort of describing yourself, explaining yourself. I don't describing like your background, introducing yourself. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, anyways, this for me in this podcast, identity really played a lot in the evolution of it.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like a lot of us battle with it. And the first thing that I think that I thought you guys would sort of, how do I say this? I thought the first thing that you guys would start to see a change in yourself is your realization of identity. And because you grew up in the States, you kind of grew up in the States.
Yeah.
And you both mentioned that you both were trying to find your roots, right?
Yeah.
And so what do you think and how do you think the podcast will evolve, I guess, identity-wise?
Ooh.
Deep questions.
Oh, that's a really good question. I think it'll evolve into a brand that will encourage people to be comfortable with who they are at the end of the day.
Is that something you guys battled with growing up? Because I grew up here all my life. I was born in the States, then I moved back, and then I moved out to the States, and I was like, fuck, who am I?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And it's so funny because that first question that you asked could, she has her answer, and then I also have mine, and it was a great question because I literally just thought of things that I'd never really thought of before. But I had to go, now that I think about it, I had to go through about 3 years of preparation to even be ready to meet her. I realized that.
Wow.
So
Did you know this?
I didn't.
Yeah, honestly, I've thought about it a few times, and I've thought about who I was even 3 years ago. Yeah. I wouldn't have been ready to know her or to have this partnership with her.
Where were you identity-wise? At least
I didn't really know my identity. I was sort of just kind of going with the flow of what everybody expected of me. Especially growing up in the States. I think it's very natural for a brown girl to not feel like they belonged or he or she belonged.
Right.
And I didn't realize that that's how I felt, but now that I look
even
back,
brown boys.
brown boys, yeah. I'm well, you know, because I'm a brown girl, but yes, brown boys look great. But yeah, I think that if I wanted to simplify my identity issue was that I didn't feel like I belonged, and it really does come down to what do you see around you and what kind of identities are being enforced around you as a child. And my identity was not being enforced around me inside the home. In
the, I guess, from what perspective though?
From I don't know, from my perspective, I guess.
I get, but yeah, okay, go ahead.
So like, so you know, at home, inside, you know, my mom and dad would, yes, we're Chamorro. My dad had a pretty strong local accent, even after being in California for 20 years. Was very Chamorro in that way, and you know, so we practiced certain traditional Chamorro practices like barbecuing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you think about just media in general, which is a huge influence on how we think every day, right. I didn't see Chamorro girls. I didn't know what it meant to really be Chamorro outside of that home. Was there a particular subculture that you attached yourself to living out there, growing up out there? So I grew up in Vallejo, which is primarily African American, Filipino, and Latino. Okay. So I did feel like I related to them more, but I still knew that I wasn't that.
Right, because you'd go home and culture pops back in. You're still getting in trouble by mom and dad. Or, right.
But like mainstream media, TV shows, movies, advertisements were primarily, you know, not colored.
Right. Yeah. For sure.
I mean, I definitely went through,
whitewashed.
Yeah. And I went, you know, as a young adult, I went through my, you know, phase in thinking that other standards of beauty, blonde hair, blue eyes were, you know, were true. And I wasn't that.
Well, it's still a thing. I think in the Philippines to go and get your skin whitened.
Yeah.
Right. People do skin bleaching and stuff like that because they believe that having lighter skin is some sort of form of beauty. Right.
Yeah.
But okay, go ahead. Good.
Oh, no, definitely. Like I think that's what it was though, is that I was sort of in this limbo of not really belonging in the world that I was living in, and then feeling insecure about it. And I just wasn't mature. 3 years ago, I was not mature enough. And like something sparked this. I went through like the self-help phase, you know what I mean? Where you're just like reading a bunch of self-help books.
Right.
And you're
following
trying to
a bunch
dig,
of Instagrams.
You know? Yeah. I started practicing yoga. I just went through this whole self-discovery type of journey.
For sure.
3 years later.
You ever traveled alone?
Yes, that's what I ended up doing.
Okay.
That was kind of like what I did right before I came back to Guam. I went to India.
Okay.
And so I just did a lot of learning about myself, and I do think that all of that work prepared me to have a healthy partnership with her, because I think if you don't have a healthy relationship with yourself, just like being in a romantic relationship,
of course,
to have a healthy business partnership or any friendship, you need that.
Yeah, for sure. You can't love somebody more than you love yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, the crazy part is you said it took 3 years, right? We lived in San Francisco at the same time. She used to buy these cookies at my work.
Oh shit.
And I'm pretty sure I served her a couple of times, because that time I was a manager at one of the locations. And she's like, yeah, you guys have these really cool like cookies. I don't know what
like macaroons or something.
Sylvana's girl.
They're like Filipino versions of macaroons, and they were my favorite.
Yeah. And I worked at locations, so I'm like, what are the odds that we cross paths?
Right.
But I don't know, the universe was like, you're not ready to meet each other yet, because you both have to kind of go through your own self-exploration. And
for sure.
And the content we're producing right now is very, you know, it's kind of heavy sometimes.
Yeah,
too.
for sure.
It's very, yeah. So.
How about you, for at least leading up to where you're at now in your life? And it does take a sense of trying to find yourself, doing self-help stuff.
Yeah.
And is your journey sort of similar to hers, where you kind of grew up in the States and then kind of grew up here though, and then moved back out to the States? Did you identify more with people out in the States, or like living out in the mainland, or you were just, your time on Guam was just temporary and you didn't really know. I don't know. I'm just, I don't want to try and assume anything.
So my life was kind of like half, but just in like different time periods.
For sure.
So I was born in Japan. I moved to Southern California when I was 2, lived there till I was 10 or 9 or 10. Then moved to Guam and then went to San Francisco for college when I was 18 and came back when I was 23.
Okay.
And then during that journey, I also felt very lost in San Francisco. I felt like I love San Francisco. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Like, God, their food is so good. But I felt like I didn't belong. Like, it wasn't my home. And I struggled with that for about like 5 years I was there, like college and then post-college. So I moved back to Guam. And then in 2018, early 2018, I moved to Bali because I was like, I need to find myself. I always want to move to a foreign country. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this now. And I left to find myself. And I didn't, in a way.
Yeah.
And I don't think we ever find ourselves. We're constantly building ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy because when I came back, I started meeting all the people I needed to meet. So I connected with Gilayna. I connected with like Brian Munya. So he and I became like really good friends. My other business partner, Julius Naranjo, I met him like after I came back. It's like all these connections, all this energy happened after I went to go find myself.
Right.
Didn't find it, came back home, and was home all along.
Right.
So it was like a really interesting transitional period where I felt like I just stripped the layer, and now I'm trying to figure out what the second layer is underneath all that.
Right. You had to sort of break yourself down, and sometimes it's not exactly where we think it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people, and whether you grew up in the States or half your life was in the States or here on Guam or your whole life is here on Guam, and you end up leaving Guam, it's so weird because every single person goes through it.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, who am I? You know, people are like, hey, speak your language, or, you know, tell us something about your culture.
Yeah.
It's like, but Guam is so diverse.
It is, yeah.
You know, and it's like we have all kinds of people now.
Yeah.
Right? Do I have to tailor it to just being Chamorro, or do I tailor it to being everybody who's in my life, whether they're Chamorro or not?
Yeah.
And it almost becomes confusing.
Right.
And I think that's why a lot of people who move from Guam to the States or just live on the States but have some sort of tie, a cultural tie to Guam, we attach ourselves so easily to subcultures. And like my brain and my mind's been exploring this thought of the importance of subcultures and what's happening here on Guam.
Yeah.
Right. On Guam, we have the culture, but there was never real subcultures.
Right.
And with the advancement of technology and all this, now we're seeing subcultures really thriving.
I'm actually pretty curious about that because obviously I didn't grow up here, so I don't really know what all of that is like.
Yeah,
so
but I think it's less racial or cultural subcultures and more like artistic music, food. So now we're like really developing the personality of what it means to come from here. That makes any sense.
Yeah. I think I know what you mean.
We leave and we come back and we bring all these things that we learn from abroad and we bring it back here, and then it changes and eventually changes. And so now I feel like our society's battling of what's going to take the forefront, right?
Like, what does it mean to be Chamorro?
Right. Chamorro or even Guamanian, because now not all of us are Chamorro.
Well, that's a distinction that I understood even growing up in California. It's like you're Guamanian if you call Guam home. You're Chamorro if you're indigenous to Guam, right? So like,
but would call? I always question like would calling it Chamorro like fade out, and eventually people would be.
I hope
attaching
not.
To coining, being from Guamanian.
Oh, right? No, dude, I'm Chamorro until I die.
Yeah,
My kids are going to be Chamorro.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Right. But
I had that question a lot when I was in San Francisco. And that time I couldn't answer it because I wasn't educated in terms of like how to properly answer that question.
Right.
And in a way, I felt like this is the reason why I met Gilayna, she really inspired me to go deeper into my roots, because I grew up with like in a Japanese household.
Okay.
My dad was Chamorro, part Japanese. My mom is full Japanese.
But it was mainly Japanese.
It was mainly
customs you guys were following.
Yeah. Since my dad was a pilot, he was always gone. So of course my mom, her second language would be English. So she spoke to me in Japanese. So I grew up with the Japanese practices. But when people would ask me, like when I moved to Guam, my dad would be go kiss your auntie. I was like, huh? Like, why suddenly did I have like a huge extended family? What is respect to me? What is balutan? Like fiesta, like just all these practices I didn't understand.
Different now. It's a whole nother slew of customs that you have to apply to your life now.
Yeah. And when I met her, she already knew like how to speak Chamorro, like the sentences and like putting it together. At least.
Just talking me up.
And I felt so embarrassed because I didn't know that part of myself. And after this partnership and after like moving to Guam, it inspired me to kind of be more consciously aware of my other half.
Right.
Yeah.
It's something you never addressed, or was just never.
You know, I don't want to disclose my age, but
it's okay.
When you're younger,
I'm
20s.
I'm 32, so.
But you know, when
I'm 32 this year, so I don't know if it matters now.
You're the youngest one at this table. Let's just put it that way.
But you know, I feel like especially in
better
our
hide
generation.
the shot glass.
Yeah, I know. Well then. Or at least our generation now, we have so much opportunities to build our brand and do our creative work, right? So we have this hustle culture where we're constantly hustling on side projects and multiple projects on our day jobs. So I felt like I was more fixated on that versus like kind of digging deeper into my identity. But the older I'm getting, I'm thinking, you know, the first Japanese funeral I went to, I was like, whoa, this is so different from the Chamorro funerals I've been to, or weddings, you know. So I don't know if that comes with age when you become more like consciously aware of your cultural roots. Yeah. But when I was younger, I was just so quote unquote busy.
Yeah, I mean, growing up for me, I never questioned my culture because I was living it.
Yeah,
every day.
Exactly.
You know, you're not noticing anything different until someone points out, like, what are you doing, dude? Like, no, this is how I grew up.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until you like go out to the States, and that's when things sort of like become noticeable of the things you're doing. Then you start questioning, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Is this the right way? How come they say it's wrong?
Yeah.
Are they more Chamorro than me? Right? Or are they more Guamanian than me? And I think, I guess where I was going with the whole identity thing is because it's something that everybody struggles with, and it's like, I still haven't figured it out. And I've talked, and the amount of people like I've talked to, it's like, it still hasn't set me straight.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
because
we have such a long history of even colonialism. Like, I don't really want to get too far into it, 'cause we can talk forever about it, right?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, if you want to.
I don't know. It's fine. But I just think that also had a huge effect on, you know, the Chamorro identity as well. So being infused with these other cultures that have been present on the island for hundreds of years has a lot to do with it. And now technology, and it is an interesting time right now to see how people want to define what it means to be Chamorro. Because right now, with at least a lot of people that I hang out with, it's important to learn the language, right? And that hasn't been a part of being Chamorro in a long time, is speaking the language, at least for our generation.
Yeah, but the question I always ask is, who defines it?
We do.
What is the min? You know, what is the minimum requirement to say, all right, you're Chamorro, dude?
You know what?
I
say, like, fuck what everybody else wants to say about whether or not you're Chamorro. Like, you decide, like, on your own, what is Chamorro? You know what I mean?
Did you have any issues with that when you first moved back? I mean, you sort of had you've had Chamorro culture taught to you from a time when your parents were living here on Guam, right? Or does that and so the culture evolved between you learning your culture and moving back and actually like living here. Here.
Yeah.
So were there sort of a battle, like, no, girl, it's still
a battle.
Yeah.
Dude, I had an auntie that I won't. I love you, Auntie.
You don't have to disclose any names. Yeah.
But here's just an example of an interaction. But I had an uncle. We were at a party, and an uncle was like, "Nen, you know, you're gonna sing. You're gonna sing, right?" Because they always like call me up to sing whenever like there's a party. I guess they've been doing that since I was a kid. Like, geez.
Well, you must be a good singer, right?
But
because if you were
like,
if you were shitty, I'm sure you'd be like, no, don't give her the mic.
But naturally, like I always have, like I'm down. I mean, truly, like I'm never gonna just say no, especially to this uncle. But and I'm not gonna say no, but I do play this game of like, you know, like it's okay, like no, it's okay, uncle. And so this auntie was there, and I was just like, really, I was just joking, but she saw me like go like this, and she was like, "You never say no to your uncle. We are not in San Francisco.
Oh shit.
We are not in San Francisco. We are not at the mainland.
Shit. Oh yeah.
You're in Guam." And I was just joking, but like I got a lot of like moments like that where I was being checked.
Right.
And then there was moments where I just felt like an asshole because I acted in a way that I thought was normal, and then I stepped back and somebody did check me, but in a nice way, and say, "Hey, like, you know, in our culture we do this, and so it doesn't make sense that you would act that way." And I'm like, "Oh shit, you're right. It doesn't make sense that I would act that way." But then I would, you know, and then it makes sense. Like, I don't know, like if it's coming from a place of love too, it's, you know, but I did experience a lot of, and I still do. I still experience a lot of like, you know.
Yeah, and that's why like I'm a true believer of Guam's going through this weird societal shift, right? Because now we're so influenced by the outside world,
Right.
more so than we were growing up when we were younger, and now people don't show the respect that there was before, but that's just what society is, you know. I mean, I have nieces and nephews that don't amen me. You know, they see me more as someone else, like a cousin, than
Like an
as
equal.
an aunt or But when you were growing up, if I didn't honor uncle,
Yeah.
wait till we
You
get
get
to the
in
car.
trouble. No, I've had it, dude. You've never had another auntie, and auntie just call you out like, "Hey, how come you didn't amen me?"
Yeah.
No.
In Saipan, you know how it is in Saipan, and I was just told this like a couple months ago that if the baby is your auntie, you have to amen the baby.
Oh.
And if you don't amen the baby, then the mother's gonna see, and then it's gonna talk to your mom and tell you, and your mom's gonna get mad at you because you didn't amen your auntie. Yeah, that's how it is over there. I mean, that's the old customary Chamorro, like custom. I don't know of how you're supposed to amen, but here on Guam, like society's so evolved. Right now we're mixing different things, and now not just different cultures here, but now everything from the internet. Right. So
I think all the more reason though to make sure that we're keeping up our customs as well. You know, because.
But does the Chamorro culture does it have to evolve with technology or with?
I think either way it's going to.
Here was my question, or something that I've been battling with for a long time. But is our identity associated with people, certain people in our lives, important people in our lives? So, for example, our grandparents, right? Right now, they're the elders. They know the most about the culture. But when they pass, how connected do we feel anymore? And I had this debate when my grandpa passed away. My grandpa's Japanese on my mom's side. So my mom left or got married when she was 23. So she's been living in America more so than in Japan now. But she and I had this conversation saying that when grandma and grandpa pass, we have no purpose to go to Japan anymore. So it made me question how much of my Japanese identity is going to like slowly fade because I'm not consistently going there anymore.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're not practicing the culture exactly the way your grandparents are, then naturally the way you identify with that specific culture isn't going to exist, right?
Wait, say that again?
Like, I mean, so for instance, like when it comes to the language, like if, oh my God, wait, how do I articulate this? I had a thought and then it just kind of like trailed away. Like, okay, so like if my grandma speaks Chamorro, right? And she does, both of my grandparents do, or both sets. And I don't speak it, which I don't. Once they pass away, if it's just us and, you know, in the world, then that part of the culture doesn't exist anymore.
And that's a scary thought to have, right?
Well, if you choose for it, right?
Well, yeah.
And I agree with you that your identity is shaped by those who you surround yourself with, right? And that's why I brought up subcultures. Like, I can easily be myself, be my whatever descent I come from, but then I identify with the Black culture. You know, wear baggy clothes, you know, maybe they'll allow me to say the N-word, you know. Maybe
is that all the Black culture?
maybe I'm like rap, and I'm not stereotyping anything, but, you know, it's just what media has presented to me, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's, or even Mexican culture, right?
Yeah.
And I asked this with Polyeric Forbes back then, was if a Filipino guy, full Filipino, hangs out and is raised by a Chamorro family, and they consider him Chamorro, is he Chamorro? And he said no, because Chamorro is a bloodline, right? But for me, if he was to hang out with me and I couldn't tell the difference, he's Chamorro.
Yeah.
Right? He does everything we do. He says all the words we say. Oh, yeah, Chamorro.
I personally think that culture is passed on through actions. I don't, you know, yes, bloodline, absolutely, but what is culture at the end of the day? It's like things that you do all the time, right? As a community. So
Right. And I guess, it is. That is a very tough question, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I can see how it can be a consistent battle, because it's nothing. It wouldn't be anything straight, because you'll always get a different story from someone different. Right?
I think that's kind of how we make a really good partnership, because we both have very different views on that subject.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
Yeah.
Ooh, the tough questions are coming. Shots fired, G.
So for me,
let me tell you how we are different.
how we're different.
This is our yang.
I'm about to pour a shot. I was like, okay.
We need to prepare for this.
No. I think we balance each other very well. I'm very passionate about some subjects, and she is too. And then every time we butt heads, it's more like, instead of like shots being fired, we literally both pull back. I'm like, okay, where are you coming from? We state our case, and then we actually sit and think about it before like rebuttaling right after. It's not a defense mode or anything. It's like, okay, let me think about this, and then I'll get back to you tomorrow when I sit with it. That's one thing I really appreciate about our partnership.
Most definitely.
We're always trying to understand the other point of view.
When we have, disagreements, but even I wouldn't say our different views on this subject is a disagreement.
Oh, no. I mean,
it's not even like really
content making or
But now I'm curious.
Opening chat now.
No, I think it's more of where we're both coming from. Like, it's not necessarily like a view or like a set view.
Well, it's like you said, both of you came up from different backgrounds. So of course your views on identity or the cultural background, that's what we're aiming towards, right?
Yeah.
Would be differing.
Yes.
And it wouldn't be along the same lines. Now, if you guys grew up in the same household, did all the same things all the time, and all the customs all the time, then it wouldn't make sense. Like, no, but you guys did then it'd be like, weird. Like, then it'd be the same.
Yeah. Do you want to go into detail with that one? She's like,
go for it.
See. You want me to pour you another shot?
I'm about to just...
I think that my approach to identity has been kind of extreme. Like, I feel like I landed on Guam. I've been like, yes, I'm here. Like, teach me all the words and tell me what to do. And we're with family. And I don't know. Like, I just want to know everything. I've been looking for literature that I can read. I want to know our history. I want to know everything about what we've been through as a people.
Do you feel like you've missed out on something that you have to
absolutely
have to like really surge yourself with?
Yes, because I feel like whether or not I know about it, I'm affected by it. Because I think about the things that I've been through, the things that my family have been through, even down to like growing up with people in the house that suffer from depression and anxiety. when I really dig deep into why I am the way I am, it all points back to who was I around all the time? What was my environment? And who were those people around all the time when they growing up? And that naturally, it ties in with, yes, culture and identity, but just the history of Chamorro people. Those are just the people that we come from, you know?
For you, does culture and identity go hand in hand? Even though you named it differently?
Yes, it does. But it's still such an evolving thing for me as well right now.
For sure.
But right now in my journey, and what I see important, right, is that I need to know the history of my people. I need to know, you know, what happened to us that could make us whatever we are right now. And how does it play into the state of what it means to be Chamorro today? Because I can map things that happened to us 100 years ago and connect it directly to the state of being Chamorro right now, you know? So I think that's what is important. The more I do like self-discovery work and I start to love myself more, the more I realize that loving myself for me means embracing the Chamorro language. It means embracing our history. It means embracing our customs, and it means preserving let me just state I'm a yoga instructor, right? Okay. So yoga in itself, the philosophy, if you were to simplify it into one word, it's connection. So being connected to the self and being connected with the things around me and the land. And naturally, if I'm connected to the land, I want to preserve it, right? So even down to being able to preserve the land and its resources, what does that mean? And how is that related to being Chamorro? And I think if you love being Chamorro or if you even call Guam home, that has to do with it. You know what I mean? It all plays into, it's like a whole thing.
Right.
So that to me, making it important to learn about our history will lead to you deciding whatever it means for you to be Chamorro, I think, as well. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
And how does it differ from yours? From your point of view?
About identity?
Yeah.
So identity is something I've always kind of struggled with in terms of, because I grew up one way, and then when I came to Guam, introduced to a completely like different culture in itself. So up till now, I don't know when I'm being too mamalo, because in the Japanese culture, you're always on the bottom. So you always need to apologize for things that, even though you're right, need to apologize.
Sorry, I'm right.
So
sorry, I'm very correct.
Sorry, you're wrong.
And you're wrong.
Exactly. And I'm just like, I'm a Leo, so I'm like, fuck no, I'm not wrong. But I worked at hospitality, and there are a couple of cases where I was the only Japanese speaker, and I had to resolve the issue, and I had people yell at me, says, "You're not real Japanese. Bring me a Japanese speaker, a legit one." And I was like, "I'm so sorry, I'm the only one here that could translate." He goes, "You're not Japanese." It just hit me. I was like, whoa, really?
Right.
Yeah, so what does Japanese mean in that sense? And what does also Chamorro mean in that sense? And to be like frankly honest, like my dad was the Chamorro one, right? And ever since like my dad passed away recently last year, I just felt like this line was just like cut, you know?
So your Chamorro identity?
In a way, my Chamorro identity. Like I know I'm always gonna have a connection with the island. I have a connection with my aunts and uncles who I know love me and will like teach me everything about the island, but my dad was my person, you know? And it made me think like, okay, if my dad's line is cut and then down the line, knock on wood, my mom passes, who am I? So I feel like right now I need to really create my own identity to what I feel best fits for me. So not like taking pieces and parts of my parents and pieces and parts of like what I've learned and mold it into like my own identity and culture and practices is the only way that I could kind of like move forward.
And that's what this show is actually really teaching us too.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're both secretly like getting out of this show, by having like the GNA sessions and having discussions about different topics, and then meeting all these amazing different women and hearing their stories.
Right.
We're like sort of looking for, what does that mean? Like, what is identity? What, constructs an identity? Because we're both still, sort of figuring that out for ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Huh. But I guess so you consider yourself more extreme in wanting to pursue some sort of cultural tie because you've been away from it for so long, and I'm getting from you is like, for you it doesn't really matter. You're finding identity in something else now. Is that what it is? That what I'm sort of like?
For me, it's kind of a balance, right? Since I grew up with the for the Japanese like practices, meeting Gilayna and coming back on Guam is like really teaching me about the Chamorro practices. So I want to live a very balanced life, and in the future, if I have kids, I want to be able to pass down what I know equally. Because of course, like I said, like my dad's gone, so it's not like I could call my dad like, yo, like, I wanted to what this word
barbecue,
like sure. What does this mean? And have these like insightful conversations. So I, in some way, I guess like meeting these amazing people on our podcasts and also being on your podcast as well, and just like working with Gilayna more deeply, it's kind of like I'm learning about our culture here. And taking that knowledge and trying to be a sponge and like absorb all of that so I could pass it on. And then, my future kids could decide like what their culture means to them and make their own definition of it.
Right.
Yeah, but I want to make sure I pass on something. So I think to answer, I don't know if I answered your question.
I feel like you guys are in the same path though. I don't see how you guys are like
well, I guess you're right, Boo. Yeah. Thank you for teaching us that.
I'm just trying to like discern what the biggest difference is.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a different journey, but it's the culture is what attaches you guys to each other.
I think we just have different approaches.
I see.
Yes, that's a better, not different approaches.
Yeah.
That's the better word.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're consciously taking like Chamorro classes.
Why do you think you're extreme?
Because, well, I don't know so when I first, actually still now, when people find out like, oh, you just moved back, I'm 29, I'm gonna be 30. I'm actually really excited about that. I'm like not ashamed at all. But the first question I get is, why the hell did you move back? Like, why? And that's sad. Honestly, not to me, but it's sad for them because it's like, so you live somewhere and you don't like where you live. But I mean, honestly, like that's what I get normally. It's like, well, you're already there. Like, why did you move back?
Right.
It's like, I'm like anomaly.
Yeah.
For coming back.
You got to think about moving off island and chasing the American dream was what you taught your kids to do. I mean, for me, it was I went to college and came back and came back home and got a job and I'm doing it, right? That's just what it is. That's the path that is set for us. Automatically is to move off island. That is the better life, and that's sort of what's been ingrained into the DNA of a lot of kids who grew up here maybe in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Most definitely, yeah. I think it's bullshit.
Well, of course, today, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
But we couldn't say that 10 years ago.
That's true.
Right?
That's true.
Because we were still going to Blockbuster and shit, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
I actually really miss my trip to Blockbuster. I mean, I love watching movies, but I mean, okay. So obviously it's bullshit for me. Like, I don't want to offend anyone.
It's Icon was called Miles back in the day.
Yeah. No, but it is bullshit that you have to leave now today because I believe now I'm of the belief that anything you want to do, you can do it from here.
Yeah.
And be able to be successful and not only have to deal with people from here, but also deal with people worldwide, all around, right? Because of technology. Right?
Yeah.
But back then, and I guess when we were kids growing up here, it's like, that's what it was. Where are you going to college?
Yeah.
The States.
Yeah.
I think now you're finding more graduates choosing UOG over going to the States.
Right.
But I believe that percentage was much lower back then. And you'd see more people, the diaspora, right, was a lot more than it is now. It's still happening. But,
it is, yeah. Yeah. So I guess that's why I think I'm extreme, because I get that reaction. You know?
But you're curious, right?
I'm very curious.
And you're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think like when I met her, she was just head straight, like, I'm gonna do this. And I did that. I was like, oh, so what do you do? It's like, oh, I'm taking tomorrow classes so I can meet after tomorrow class, but then I have Mihi, so that I'll meet you after. I was like, damn. She's going like full force, you know, and
like
I thought
I don't want to waste any time. That's why.
Well, surrounding yourself, immersing yourself in as much culture as you
Cultural
can. Right?
work, yeah, definitely. It was actually not easy to do that.
Yeah,
to find friends that were down.
Dude, man, I spoke to a couple of teachers from GW, Chamorro teachers, husband and wife, and they said it was a struggle for them to teach Chamorro, you know, in the classroom, because they knew in their mind and their heart that Chamorro only lasted 45 minutes.
Oh man!
But
as soon as they walked out of the class, it goes back to whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And so he goes, just the fact that even as simple as our street signs aren't in Chamorro.
Ugh.
You know, directions aren't in Chamorro.
Yeah.
That's not. Yeah, people can preserve the language, but you need to immerse society in it. Why do you think you can go to Japan and speak Japanese within 3 months? Because you're constantly around it all the time. You go to Spain, you go to Mexico, and speak Spanish within 3 months, right? I think that's the man. Verify that. no, but
yeah,
right? And it's so much harder. And it's so much harder for us here to be able to be. I'm going to speak Chamorro every day, and just the fact that you're making a conscious effort to immerse yourself in it. I don't think it makes you extreme. It just
it's definitely the people who are actively learning Chamorro right now are a minority. I think that a lot of people don't know the importance of preserving a language, you know. There's a lot in a language, and there's a lot of windows in a language to understanding a people, you know, especially when it comes to certain phrases that don't have a direct translation to English, you know, or just like certain, I don't know, like today, I actually had my first intermediate session today, and the teacher is Dr. Ken Cooper.
Okay.
And he gives a talk usually in the first day of language class. I've heard before, but I love to hear all the time. But he talks about statistics. Like I think the 2010 consensus is like 16% of the population spoke fluent Chamorro, which could be convoluted because a lot of them who just say like the phrases that we all know could probably just say like, yeah, I speak Chamorro, right?
Right.
So if you think about it, we're like, what, 5-10 years away from losing it completely?
You think so?
I mean, if you're looking at the numbers, right? But now there's like this huge effort to revitalize the language. It's really hard though, for all of those reasons that you just stated.
Yeah, you know what I believe was the cause of all that? FestPac.
Yeah.
I believe FestPac happened, and we saw everything that we didn't have.
Yeah.
Oh, but it's such a beautiful thing.
It is, of course, Renaissance, right? I mean. It's a revival, right? And it's beautiful to see. Me, I'm not in it myself, but it's beautiful to see, and that people are taking conscious efforts to keep it alive, right?
And that's our hope. The people who are learning it actively, it's our hope to see our street signs in Chamorro, you know, at least the main, you know, word in Chamorro, and then, you know, it should be English subtitles, you know what I mean? Right. That's what we want to see. We want to be able to walk into any location, hear it, you know, and to hear the kids playing and speaking it as well. But I don't know.
How much do they know how much of it is enforced in the schools
right now?
Yeah.
I personally don't know. I know of Harao, right? School that was developed for
and they just became an immersion school, right?
Awesome.
They just got that charter or something like that.
And I know of a daycare that's full, that they only speak Chamorro.
But like in the public school system,
I really don't know.
No.
And I do think that most of the curriculum is all U.S. based.
Yeah, because I don't know if you also experienced this, but when I moved back to Guam, or when I moved to Guam first in 4th grade, I took Chamorro 4th and 5th grade and 6th grade. After that, I just stopped.
Yeah, I went to private school from 6th grade to 12th grade, and I took a Chamorro history class and Chamorro classes in middle school, but it was never like super serious. Actually, I take that back because it was Miss Anne Marie that was our teacher.
Oh,
she
no
was
way.
really super serious.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but as kids,
Yeah.
right, we're not gonna
You're just like,
Chamorro class,
Yeah.
Okay, straight to geometry.
Yeah.
So but elementary school, I mean, I got a Chamorro award, right? I mean, and that's where I felt like elementary school, it was very, very much so alive.
Yeah.
Like Chamorro teachers, it was a Chamorro environment and stuff like that. But yeah, for me too, kind of disappeared. And to want to learn the language wasn't a requirement in life.
Yeah.
Right.
Because in high school, our options was Japanese and Spanish.
Mhm.
Because they're already setting you up to go to the States
Right.
and pursue your education there. So our foreign language class was just the two.
Right.
Chamorro wasn't even an option.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow, it is a pretty heavy topic though.
it is. It's tough. It's tough to like go get through.
Yeah.
Right. Because there's so many different angles you can approach it from, but who's really right?
Yeah.
Right. And I had an artist on the podcast, and we were talking about what's considered indigenous art. Are people today making indigenous art? Right? Does it have to be latte stones and coconut trees and the island and depictions of what it was like back in the ancient times or the latte period? Are people making indigenous art today? Is the music that's being made considered indigenous art?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that those questions are being posed,
Yeah.
yes, is a good sign.
Yeah.
I think because they, we're seeking that answer actively as people. Whether it doesn't matter the answer, I don't think that we come to.
Yeah.
I think that the fact that we're asking is like the most important part at this point in our existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's some people that would consider some things indigenous art, and some people like, would John Dang Show and 4-piece band's music be considered indigenous art because it's created here? Right? And it's like, oh God. I think there has to be some sort of like Chamorro period, and then what this Renaissance is doing. Right? What's happening? What are we gonna name this period 100 years from now?
Yeah.
What are we gonna name the last 100 years?
Right. 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 Where we basically
Interesting.
like lost everything, and there's a new generation that's fighting to keep it alive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder, like, is our specific generation very curious about identity because we were kind of at the brink of shift from MSN Messenger to like literally going full on technology.
Right.
We're in that transition mode.
We're in the
So
gray area.
That's the reason why we're probably so curious and aware about
our
these
generation
changes.
can relate to VHS tapes and
Oh hell yeah.
and to Instagram.
Yeah.
Right.
Quiet
Yeah.
storm on the radio.
Yeah, telling my younger sister, I was like, dude, I know everything that you're going through. You know what I mean? I was through the sucky phase. You know?
LimeWire.
Yeah.
And then with Frostbite.
Kazaa.
Yeah.
Napster.
Kazaa Light.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Man, throwback for
Yeah.
real.
Dude, when they used to like trick you on LimeWire, you're like, oh yeah, I want to download this song, and you click on it and it ends up being something super gross.
Or it's a scratchy. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like oh shit, that's a bad version. What the hell?
Or
I thought that was a good
it cuts
version.
off in like 30 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
When you have to burn CDs too, and
Right.
you charge your friends $5. I'll burn your CD if you give me $5. How about my King car?
Yeah, just buy me lunch.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. I don't know what our generation is considered. You know, what this transitional period is considered. And I think it's hard to determine now because we're living in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be historians 100 years from now looking back on this time for Guam and being like, okay, well, something happened. Something was happening here. And there's some kind of shift happening. You know, a lot of the people are butting heads. You know, what's going to take precedence? You know, is it the culture? Is it refueling the economy? Right? Is it trying to make trade relationships? Is it decolonization? Is it self-determination? Right? Or are they all kind of hand in hand? It's heavy. I think it's
well, considering what's happening right now.
Yeah,
too.
I think we're living through a heavy time, right?
Oh, for sure.
So what do you think is would help that?
More conversations, more disagreements,
Like this?
yeah, and more.
I think if the conversations come from love, like I think that's more productive too.
Yeah, just perspective.
Yeah.
Right. We have to be able to talk to each other and disagree with each other and talk to each other.
Yeah.
Right. Because we're all not going to see on the same line.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Sorry. It's just, it really has been like, for me, in that regard, it's just been like a really heavy couple of weeks for me.
Well, I can imagine the last couple of years for you. Right?
Well, the last couple of years, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It's
it's always, I mean, when you start talking about identity and you talking about the future of a people, you know, I guess whatever background you come from, but as long as you call this place home, the conversation always gets tricky and sticky.
But I also think that's just indicative of like where we are, you know, what's going on.
It's evolution.
Yeah.
Right? Whether you believe in it or not. But we're so affected by everything outside. Like, we don't want to be like the United States, but we're so much like it. But we don't even notice that we're doing the same things that the U.S. is doing, right?
But if you read a lot of our history, there's a reason why we're a lot like the U.S.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
that was purposefully done.
Colonization. I mean, that's what it is. That was the purpose. Yeah. And if you read back to in 1898, who was the president? Was it Roosevelt? Was Roosevelt the president during
1898? No, Roosevelt was a child in 1898.
Franklin?
In 1898?
Who was the president then?
I don't know.
I don't know about that. Even Stevens song's coming in.
After
I know Roosevelt was.
Okay, well, it was somebody. It was before the Philippines gained their independence in 1936 that somebody said. I'm pretty sure it was Roosevelt. See, when President Roosevelt was the president.
We're on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
02?
Can I call a lifeline?
1901.
1901, 1902. So okay, so after Theodore Roosevelt, right, Teddy? So after Guam and Port. What's up?
It's like Uncle Ted.
Yeah.
Uncle Ted.
Yeah, you know, see Ted. When in the Philippines and Guam was acquired through the Treaty of Paris, right, in 1898 after the Spanish-American War. There was a quote from Theodore Roosevelt that said, the Philippines was never meant to become a colony, right? So, and then they had like some sort of upheaval in the Philippines, and then they had someone start the clock for them to gain their independence, right? For Guam, it was a little bit more different because if you look at the history of Guam, right, it was a lot of outside influence. Right. In the Philippines, I think they have the oldest university in Asia.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can sort of see in those time periods where the Filipinos were and where the Chamorros were back then, right? And people living there.
Well, I would say that the Chamorros had our culture, we've been here for almost 4,000 years at least. For sure. So like, I'm not sure that's I think that's debatable.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely not a scholar. I definitely shouldn't be trusted on any of the information that I am saying on this podcast. But I can see how, yeah.
Wait,
sure, us being a colony of the United States, yeah, you can see the Western influences. We get excited when Red Lobster and Olive Garden and Jack in the Box come to Guam. People are flooding the streets. Like, dude, these things been around forever. at least 10, 15, 20 years, right?
Also, we live on an island, so get your own damn lobster. Like, why do you need red lobster?
It's conditioning, right? It's dependency. And that's, I think, if Guam is going to move forward, we have to break dependency.
Yeah.
But when 50,000 people are dependent on the United States to support them every month, then it becomes a problem for society.
Right.
You know, we can't just say, all right, yeah, get them out of here, and then we're going to figure it out. Like, okay, first we got to figure out what to do with these 50,000 people who expect a check every month. Right?
Oh, man, I am not well read enough in that subject. But that is a very, that comes up a lot, the economic part of all of that.
Of what, like
of our relationship with the U.S. Yeah. And we are not.
I'm not versed either.
But I mean, we know a few people who could talk about it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
No, I'm not trying to go in depth in it. You know, I'm just, I guess you mentioned how our history is different because of colonization.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And that's it's non-debatable.
Yeah.
You know, it's evidence, and it's evident because I moved off island to chase the American dream.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, did you have a moment at all in your young adult life where you were like, why the hell am I doing this? Like, what exactly about what I'm doing is making me happy? Like, for real, at my core? Like, did you ever have a moment like that? Or?
Oh, of course. Of course. I thought money was going to make me happy. Mm-hmm. I thought having a good job was going to make me happy.
Yeah.
Oh. And yeah, sure. It makes it easier, but that's not a definition of happiness.
Where did you go to college?
U of A.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not Canada.
Okay, I was like, it could be either. Yeah, I was like, I know there's an Arizona shot glass.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
So over there, man, that's where I went through my cultural identity crisis for almost 5 years. Yeah. And I felt like I gotta move back. I feel dry. I mean, we're in the desert, but I feel like really fucking dry.
Spiritually dry.
Even in San Francisco, it's crazy because like since I went to public school for middle school and I went to a private school for high school, I like to say like a huge core of my friends were still from public school. So I didn't, high school, there was kind of like a divide between high schools. But the minute I went to college, it was like Academy, FD, St. John's, we're all friends.
Yeah, we're all Guam. Right?
We're all hanging together, and there was this Guam house and I would be there almost like every weekend. And I didn't realize it, but my roommates would be like, did you know you have an accent? I was like, what? It's like, yeah, when you're around your Guam friends, that accent runs so heavy. But when you're around us, it's like you're back to like, whatever.
Right.
And I was like, I didn't notice that, but even
it's almost like a telephone voice, right?
Yeah.
Or like if you're a waiter or waitress, you kind of like put on that mask.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think I don't know if you remember, but there was a power outage in San Francisco, and everyone was freaking out. And my friend who lived like 2 streets down, who's from Guam, was like, "Yo, come over. Let's make some like Kelaguen, just chill.
Yeah.
I'll make some wine or like mule wine or whatever on the stove or like the gas stove or whatever.
Pretend like we're in a hurricane.
Yeah. Everyone's like freaking out. He was like, dude, this is only like 2 hours. What are they tripping about? Like we lost power for like 6 months.
Right.
Yeah. But it's kind of cool that even in the States, there are communities, and we kind of like stick together.
Yeah. But isn't that a weird thing? It's like there's so much unity outside of here, but as soon as you come back here, then everything starts coming into play. And now people that you hung out with back there, you don't really see so often because now they're in different groups now, right?
Yeah.
Kind of go back to maybe friends you hung out with in high school or, people who you grew up with.
Yeah.
Right. And so, it is. I feel like we are in a weird time.
Yeah.
And we're
weird.
It is weird. It is weird. I mean, I look at society every day. It's like, shit. People are going crazy, literally.
Yeah.
People are going crazy.
Yeah.
And different communities are converging, and we almost don't know how to handle it.
I don't know. Honestly, it's so ironic for me too. it's important for me to stay connected to my Chamorro identity, but it's very ironic that a non-Indigenous practice is what brought me to that point.
What was the non-Indigenous practice?
Yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like, and I really had to reach like rock bottom. I reached a point in my life where like I could have hurt myself. Like I really could have, because I just didn't think what I was doing was worth anything. I didn't think that I was worth anything.
Purpose.
Nothing, dude. Like, and I knew people that I loved and that loved me too. But I just myself, like I just didn't, I don't know. Like I lacked an ability to be connected or something in a way. That's how.
Yeah, I mean, when I was 27, which is around the time I started this podcast, I felt the most lost in my life.
Oh.
And it's sort of really kind of like helped me, find myself and evolve my state of mind.
Right.
And sort of by talking to people and sort of finding relations in the things that we're all doing here. Like we're not all different.
Yeah.
The only way you're different is if you ain't doing shit.
Yeah.
For us.
I'm doing stuff and you're not.
For us. It's black and white. Life is binary.
Yeah. No.
But
You're either doing shit or you're not doing shit.
Yeah.
But it's like, so how do we, I think this is going back to like our real mission, right? To even making this podcast too, is like, yes, we want people to feel comfortable being in their own skin, you know what I mean? And that comes with, once you feel comfortable in your own skin and have a level of like self-love for yourself, then you're not afraid anymore to do the things that you if you believe in this type of thing, that you're put on this plane or this earth to do, right? A lot of the things that we dream about, the things that we have an urge to go for, we don't do because a million reasons that we can think of, you know what I mean? So I do think that a lot of the reason why we're going kind of crazy is because we don't do that work in practicing self-love. And what does that mean too? Like, what does it mean? Because I've definitely gotten like, oh God, you're so damn fluffy, Gilayna. Like, it's not about self-love, okay? You know what I mean? Like, stop being so damn selfish. You're so selfish.
Stop loving yourself. Enough of the love for you.
But it's not a selfish thing. I think it's a very, I think it's the exact opposite of that, actually, because you're doing the hard work it is to really explore who you are and to have compassion for yourself and to understand what it is you really want to do and not be afraid of like what everyone else thinks about it.
Yeah,
you know?
but you got to remember what the history of the culture is, right? I mean, it's serving others.
But
even
that,
your Japanese culture, right? It's you're putting yourself at the bottom to make sure people are comfortable and happy and enjoying themselves. But
I think that's like, I agree with that.
Right. Okay.
But how the hell do you serve others if you don't know how to serve yourself?
Yeah, it's very true.
You know, like, how do you do that? Like, why would you care that much about another person if you don't understand what it means to care about? Because honestly, for me personally, I believe that we're all made up of the same thing. Like, we're all
meat and flesh and bones.
Flesh.
Hey, you enjoying this conversation so far? Leave a rating and review if you're listening to this on the Apple Podcast app, and Matt will read your review on the podcast. And the reviews just help. So back to the conversation.
And then whatever the energetic part of us that keeps us alive, that flows through our bodies, you know, it's the same damn thing. So if we don't love that part of ourselves, then we're never going to appreciate that part in anyone, you know? Mm-hmm. So, I don't know. Akina, what do you think?
No, I agree. But man, I don't want to say interesting because
that's so interesting. That's her thing, and I say that's beautiful.
Well, like looking at my mom, right? My mom like has zero fucks. Like life happens, this happens, you know, and deal with it. I was like, how do we get on her level, right? And when did our generation? It's great that we're becoming consciously aware about self-love and like, but when do we lose it? And how do we lose it?
What
experience?
What and how and why are we so at this point where we feel like we don't deserve it? When I can't speak to all parents, but I feel like my parents were pretty strong to be like, all right, negativity, haters, shoot, whatever, fuck off. Yeah. I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna support my family, but I feel like our generation's a little bit more harder on ourselves when we face this negativity. We just crumble.
Well, because we're based off of likes and follows, right? Like we live off of likes and follows.
So how do you feel about Instagram taking that away? I don't know if they're still doing it. Last article I read. Not a scholar in the media tech world, but last time I heard Instagram was going to take that away.
Oh, being able to see likes.
They're
right?
going to take away the whole likes in general.
Yeah.
Don't quote me, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it really affects people and the way people view themselves. I think it's an identity killer because you're constantly comparing yourself to someone, and I can be as pretty as you, but why are you getting 10,000 more likes than me? Right? What did you do differently that I'm not doing different?
I like how you use the word pretty.
I say the word beautiful too. It's, you know, I mean, I don't attune it to any kind of gender or whatever. You know, people can be pretty, right? But it's when we get so caught up in that, and even with doing this podcast, like earlier in it, I was worried about, you know, how many people are listening to it. But I really had to step back and be like, no, are you doing this for yourself? Or are you doing this for other people to listen? Yeah. Right. And I had to tell myself, like, no, it's either you enjoy this shit out of this because it's fun and it's what makes you happy and it's super therapeutic and this and that, or you're doing it to get 100 likes or 200 likes, and it makes me feel good inside. Yeah. Right.
I hate to use your point to further my point, but that's a form of self-love, dude. Like, it really is. Like, to be able to make that, you know, to make that choice for yourself, that is a...
I'll stop. I wouldn't be able to, like, continue to do it if I was only basing it off of, you know, how many people liked it. You know, the picture I posted. Yeah. For me, I'm just happy to be able to, you know, have Matt here and have you guys here, you know, and have John here and be able to sort of make everything happen like this and be comfortable and be happy in this moment. Right. Well, and maybe that's the way this podcast has changed me. Yeah. And it was never meant to be so. And I never thought it was going to do so. Yeah.
I mean, look at us. Like, we're sitting here talking to you. But honestly, right before we started, you were the one I came to. I was like, hey, how do I do this? Like, what do you think? What's your feedback or whatever? And that moment wouldn't have happened if you didn't make that decision how many years ago to fuck what everybody else thought and to just make
for
a
sure
podcast.
Yeah. And if I was like so against other people starting podcasts, I'd be like, nah, cousin. Yeah.
Did you try to block me though? Figure it out on your own.
Yeah. Google
YouTube.
Here's a link.
Yeah, enjoy this link.
You were making fun of me though, because I was like taking notes and stuff. You're like, dude, why are you taking notes? It's just what I do. I felt like such a nerd.
But it's I don't know, for self-love, and you have to know who you are, and I guess that's where not to beat the dead horse of identity.
No.
Identity.
What are your roots?
Yeah. I mean, for self-love, you just have to really accept who you are. That you're not going to have 10,000 likes or $1 million or sell 1 million albums, right? You just have to enjoy what you're doing because you only have one life. One life, and most of us waste it comparing ourselves to each other.
Ugh, God, seriously.
Well,
to add on to that, I think you also need to have the openness to learn. Yeah, so I don't know if you can relate, but for our podcast, Gilayna and I, like, we selfishly want to learn from everyone. Like, you know, what made you like write 3 books? Like, what inspired you? What was the like light bulb moment? You know. And
shit, as soon as you sat down, you're like, so what made you want to do this? All right, here we go. You're in
Tell us all your secrets.
You're in the energy. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. So like, just have this openness and willingness to learn, even the negative aspects of you, right? And things you do need to work on. The things that other people see in you that you don't see in yourself. Right. Your identity, your culture. Right. Like, you know, just this openness to learn in this one life that we have.
Yeah, for sure. And I think if we're too focused on trying to be better than the other, and Guam has this sort of like, what's that word? It's the cliche thing about Guam is we're crabs in a bucket. You know, we shit on
crab
people.
mentality.
Yeah, you know, like we shit on people who are doing better than us.
Or like
And-
just grabbing, like,
Yeah. So we see someone going up, like no,
pulling them down.
Yeah.
Oh
But-
man.
But I feel like we are kind of like shifting away from that, but that culture is still there. All right, there's a lot about the old culture that's going away, and it's not necessarily bad.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, can I say though that from the way I see it, and this is coming from
God,
somebody
people are
who
gonna
just
hate
moved
me
back.
as soon as they hear that.
No.
Like, what? Old culture?
Listen,
Who's this guy? What is he?
but this is honestly, I have to commend you because whether or not
Get the talking
holy crap.
Better spank him. Who's this mom?
Oh my god! No. Okay, I have to give you props though because this isn't the first time we've had a conversation like this, and I've obviously listened to your other podcast episodes where people are on your show where you might not necessarily have the same views as them, but you as a person, you're so open. You'd have an openness to learning. I think you do. You're super intellectual too, as well. So like,
thank you. I don't think so. Thank you. I appreciate that. I really
you're
appreciate that.
super intellectual.
It runs in the family.
Yeah.
You're both very eloquent speakers.
We're just gonna disclose that. I'm just kidding.
Except I have a lisp.
And my voice is really high. I forgot what I was gonna say. What were we talking about? Oh, what were we? Lost it there.
Oh, I guess you were commending me.
No, before that though, because what were you saying? Because I had a
I guess.
I had a pin.
God, Matt, do you remember?
Can you Google?
Can you Google what we were talking about?
You're talking
About having this openness.
Okay, yeah. Right.
No.
Whoa.
He said something else.
Is it like self-identifying or
That's a really good point too.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I crack these jokes and then it just kind of like I lose myself
going.
sometimes. Like, fuck.
It'll come back.
As-
Crabs in a bucket.
Oh yeah. Crabs in a bucket. Thank you so much.
Boiling crab.
yeah, you're right. With potatoes.
The way I
my
see
God,
it.
that Cajun seasoning.
Yeah.
Okay, we're done.
Wait,
Shit's
where?
good.
I was like boiling crab.
Oh hell yeah! I really missed that actually.
Yeah. Red fingers. Oh wait, you wear the gloves.
Okay, crabs.
right?
Yeah.
Crabs in a bucket.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Not shrimp. Cajun seasoning and garlic butter. And corn on the cob. So
Crabs
hungry.
in the bucket? You were saying?
Yeah.
So crabs in a bucket. I do think that making a generalization like that about Guam is a tad bit unfair, but only because that there's the reason why it feels that way, right? So if you look at a super egu boyfriend or girlfriend, why is a boyfriend? Shush. Because why? Okay, so why does you know what I mean? Like when did I just shush you? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I have issues.
We won't edit that out.
Behind the scenes.
Yeah, right.
So naturally, if you come across somebody who's just really jealous, sorry, boo, if you're a jealous type.
No.
I don't think that you are.
And I hope.
Or if anybody else in the room is, might
Hopefully
learn
my
something about
girlfriend doesn't
yourself.
come
I'm
out,
just
she's
kidding.
like, yeah, you
Yeah, I'm
totally.
so jealous.
Girl, we need to go outside.
I think. Get out now. I don't care if you're his cousin. Anyways.
No, not you need to go outside. Never mind. Forget it. Let's go. Okay. Crabs in a bucket.
Anyways. Day. It stems from an insecurity. So nobody would be jealous or want to pull somebody else down unless they're fucking insecure about what they have and what they're worth. Collectively as a people, and you can tell me if this is not how you feel, because both of you guys are Chamorro and you have just as much of a right to have that opinion, right? But for me, I have an opinion of our people were not taught, at least for the past 100 years, at least, to value themselves, to value their culture, to value their identity and who they are and what they have to offer.
Well, because like, and I always quote Poly-Eric Forbes because he's like dropped some knowledge bombs on this podcast. It's because he goes, my grandmother never had to question whether she was Chamorro or not.
Wow.
And that is a question that our generation faces. And not just our generation, the generation before that.
Right.
But it's more of a question for us because now we're seeing it now we're seeing slithers of it. Right? It'd almost be like a puff of cloud. So back then, they never really had to question whether there was no real reason to hang on to anything.
Yeah.
Because they never questioned it.
Because they just were.
Yeah. Because they just were.
But they definitely had some like really tough like issues to deal with too. Like,
but for us, it's like, okay, what defines Chamorro? How do we spell it? You know, are we gonna stick with capital C, capital H? You know, are we gonna start bending some rules? How do we evolve the language with the changing English language? Are we gonna continue to grow the Chamorro language, or are we gonna continue to grow old Chamorro customs?
Right.
So it's I don't disagree with you. It's just, I think it's something that every individual needs to ask themselves of what is most important to them today at this moment.
Yeah.
What is important to you? Is it your culture? Are you trying to hang on to it because maybe you don't feel Chamorro enough because people are telling you you're not Chamorro enough? Like, no. People shouldn't be able to define whether you're Chamorro or not, how much Chamorro you are. Right?
I like how you said at this moment.
Yeah.
That really shows that the present is the most important time.
It is.
A fun fact, though. I don't know how much of a fact it is. I heard it in my Chamorro class, but it makes sense. So, like in Chamorro, Paku means now, right? Or today?
Sorry, I can't confirm
now.
that.
I don't know why. Oh my God, my teachers are going to be so mad at me. No, right? Why are you asking? Oh shit, sorry. Paku means now.
Okay.
So our phrase for like beautiful is Gef Paku. So Gef means very, pretty
beautiful.
much means very. So Gef Paku means beautiful. A direct translation would be very now.
Okay.
So this is what I was talking about, like windows to understanding our people from back in the day.
Okay.
Because right now, what do we use for beautiful?
Bonita,
and bonito, which is Spanish. Whatever.
Right.
But Gef Paku, if we were to really directly translate that, means very now. Does that mean that our people valued presence as beauty? What does that mean? Because the word for ugly is Tsat Pagu, which I believe means not now. But I hope somebody correct me. Thanks.
Matt.
Do you want to Chamorro.info? So that, I mean, that's a really cool thing. And I don't know if the commission, what is it? The orthography, has decided and made that correlation. But I mean, that's kind of cool. It's up to us to learn that stuff and to do that type of investigative work and find what resonates with us. And I think that a lot of us just don't do it. We don't do that research.
But who is right at this point?
I am right to me, and you are right to you.
right. Because you'll find evidence if you talk to older Chamorros. A lot, I'm not gonna say a lot, but there's people who disagree with how Chamorro culture is being expressed today, right? And even down to cultural dance.
Oh God, yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And so it's tricky, and I feel like we can talk hours and hours and hours and hours.
Has it been
on it? Yeah, it's definitely been over.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool. I want to go back to the self-love thing because I think it's important, and I feel like that's something that you guys are sort of aiming towards in sort of finding or kind of.
I think for
helping
me,
people
it's
find in themselves.
Yes, yeah, that, but also maintaining, because I think that people think that if you reach a certain level of self-love, we can I can experience moments of self-love, but then I can just totally drop into the exact opposite as well. Right. So I think it's about maintenance as well. What do you think?
Yeah, sometimes I go through that little tunnel that Alice falls into. Just keeps going down.
Right.
But it is definitely a practice. But you also that whole imposter syndrome. you have to also get out of that, you know, because your mind tends to like switch gears really quickly. So even though you're telling yourself all these affirmations and self-love and what you deserve, your mind could easily just like turn the switch if you don't train that muscle every single day. I think we were just talking about this before we hopped on about we practice mindfulness. I feel like our generation and time now is very into mindfulness. You know,
we care in a sense as we care about what other people have to say, or just aware of.
I think aware about taking the time to do the work. Okay. People know that you do need to take the time to do the work. I think sometimes people forget that our brain is also a muscle that you have to practice. So you can't be like, I'm going to be positive on Thursday, right. Positive Thursdays, my affirmations. And then Friday you're just like, no, I'm not going to meditate today. Yeah. Then comes Saturday, Sunday, Monday onwards. And then you're just basically going through this like dip spiral up, down. Yeah. So self-love. When I have a friend who's a yoga instructor in London. She said that sometimes we forget about self-love means to be a parent to yourself. That means doing all the things that you don't want to do. Yeah. Sometimes.
Yeah. It's maintenance, like maintaining, like cleaning your bathroom. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't necessarily want to do it, but mindfulness to us, like
someone's got to clean that shit off.
You know, like you have to like dust yourself up. Like I learned a huge thing about self-love when I went to, Indonesia. Oh, Indonesia. Close. I went to Indonesia.
Not really close. Few letters. Just in a few letters.
Like
Indonesia.
I did this. I learned a meditation technique called Vipassana, but it involved, in order for me to learn the technique, I had to check myself into a center for 10 days, and I had to take a vow of silence, and I had to take also. Like basically pledge that I wouldn't look at anyone, communicate with anyone, not even gestures the whole time. So I was completely in my own head the whole time. We meditated for like 10 hours of the day. I didn't even worry about my food. Like I would just go to the cafeteria, I would eat, and then I would go back to wherever I was supposed to go. But that's 10 days of like completely blocking off most of your senses. Like I wasn't allowed to like practice yoga, listen to music, journal, read, nothing.
Consume media.
No, consumption at all.
Right.
And I realized that
fuck, that's intense.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
that's my story.
Fine.
No, that's
totally
fucking
fine.
intense.
It's I realized then that since we're babies, we're taking in information. Shit, I'm so glad there was no liquor in there. Taking in information, and when do we stop to process it? Literally everything else that we use needs to cool down. Or, you know what I mean? Like your hard drive gets filled up, right? But like we don't treat our brains the same way. We're always like,
jeez.
Go ahead, cough in
Trying to be proper here. I'm clearing my throat in the microphone.
So yeah, I realized like, holy crap, like we don't ever stop talking. We don't ever stop taking in new data. But this at the same time, the way we protect ourselves in the present and in the future is we use all this past data to analyze what's happening to us now. And that's for the sole purpose of keeping us safe.
Yeah.
So if you literally don't go your whole life without stopping and shutting up and saying, and just letting your body process the things that have come into you, like, what do you think happens? Like, I honestly really believe like that's where disease comes in, and, you know, other sicknesses and bad habits, and reacting to certain things that or to certain people that you've never met before, but you just don't like them, or, you know, things like that. So I think that has a lot to do. That's part of the journey of self-love though, as well. You know, I think it all leads back to the same thing. Yeah. Sorry, what was your story? No, that's fucking, that's very interesting. The whole cutting yourself off from the world I can imagine it's a tough thing mentally, especially when you've consumed so much over so many years, and to do it for 10 days. I was not perfect at all. Did you find yourself like trying to sneak in? I totally had moments that I was like totally cheating. I cheated. No, I had to turn in all my electronics. Okay. Yeah, I had to turn all of that stuff in, but
ask her about her snack drawer.
Okay, so
Snickers under the mattress.
ASMR. Crunch, crunch.
So we were in a dorm, so like I shared the room with 2 other girls, and then like our rooms were were next to all the other dorm rooms, right? And the walls were really thin. Just letting you know. Mm-hmm. And anyways, I didn't turn in these biscuits that I bought because I went to Vietnam before going to Indonesia, and I bought these like biscuits that were really good, and they were just in my suitcase. And that was like a me time. It was like something that I could give myself to look forward to. So like, it's so stupid because they fed us really good. Like the food was amazing. Yeah. Vegetarian, but it was so good. Like a lot of the stuff they eat is really similar to what we eat. Like the palate is very similar. Okay. Anyways.
Like Spam and corned beef and
like soy sauce and rice and those types of tastes. And a lot of the fruits too are similar to what we grow out here. It's tropical.
How about the saltiness?
Yes.
Okay.
Again. So like, so I had these biscuits, and I just like, it was like a crutch for me. It was like, I would finish eating really fast. Like, so I would have like the dorm like building to myself, and I would like run back, and I would like eat like 2 of these just like try to open it like really silently just in case somebody, and I would eat it. And it was like, I don't know. It was like, I knew I was breaking the rules. Like I wasn't supposed to be eating there, and I wasn't even supposed to be eating my own food and like stuff like that. Like that's one of the things that I did.
Like it felt so wrong, but it felt
so wrong, but it's so like when you really look back at it, it's just like, it's kind of dumb. And it was so funny because on the last day they let you talk. Can't touch each other, but they let you talk. So I was meeting the girl that I had spent the whole 10 days eating next to for the first time after the 10 days. She was like from France or something, and
what if she had like a super deep voice? Like, holy shit, I wasn't expecting that. That would have been insane. I would have just
that was actually another cool part about it, is we had all formed stories about each other, right? Just from watching each other move around the room. And even though we weren't supposed to be doing that, but your mind does that automatically, right? So it was cool to like meet and actually see what matched up, because some things matched and some things didn't. Right. But I was telling her because that was one of the first things we shared, was like, what did you do? Did you do anything? Did you break the rules? And I was like telling her about my biscuit. She was like, oh my God, like I thought I heard, or I smelled biscuits in the room. Like, and she was like in the next room. And so I found myself like watching an ant. There was these like big ants that would like crawl on the walkway, and I would sit on the walkway and just like just watch it, and I would have conversations with it in my head. Like,
oh my goodness,
so that's random,
intense.
dude.
That's like, so intense. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to do that.
I can't even keep quiet during the movie.
Yeah, I can't even keep quiet like for right now, like for like 10 seconds. If you tell me to be quiet, I'd be like, I have to talk.
Yeah.
Hence the podcast.
Right. Can't shut the hell up now. I was told, so before you do ayahuasca, you have to go on a cleanse.
Really?
Yeah. And because the common thing for people that happens to them is they defecate and they throw up all over the place. Ooh. Yeah. And then you start feeling getting the visions and stuff like that. So you're required to go on a cleanse for 7 days. No sex, no media, no salt, no sugars, no consumption of just social media. You can't read the newspaper, stuff like that, TV.
It's like you're cleansing.
Yeah, you're literally like cleansing your mind and your body for what it's about to go through.
Yeah.
And so my friend and his wife, they did that. They followed the rules and they did exactly what they're supposed to do. And they were the only ones that didn't defecate themselves, but there's literally like people sitting in buckets, like taking shits next to them.
Wow.
Because their body can't control what's happening to it, right?
I've always wanted to try that, actually.
Ayahuasca?
Yeah. Have you ever seen The Last Shaman?
No.
Oh God, it's a documentary. It's on Netflix, actually. It's about a guy who went down there to do it, but it's super westernized boy, actually, privileged. Okay. You know, like privileged, I think maybe like Ivy League college, right? Okay. And he's like, I'm suicidal. I want to kill myself, but I'm going to give myself a year to figure out whether or not it's basically worth it to live. Mm-hmm. The journey like led him to Peru. And doing this whole process.
I heard of it. Yeah. And he was like in this room for fucking like days.
For like months, dude. Or like smoking tobacco, I guess, you know, some type of herb to cleanse as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
I need to watch that.
Yeah. Psychedelics are a trip. like literally, right, and figuratively. But it's I think it's important. Now they're introducing like LSD as like an ecstasy well, ecstasy is not literally a psychedelic, but to like treat people with depression and help them get out of like treat PTSD and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you know about Tim Leary?
I've heard the name, but I don't want to say it, and then I'm like completely
You're like,
off.
no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Do you want to Google Tim Leary for me? So Tim Leary was an ex Harvard professor, I believe. He'll go ahead and verify that. But it was him and his partner, another white guy, but like, sorry. But this was, I don't know. I think it was back in like the 60s or whatever. But he's I believe it's he was like the LSD pioneer. But
I heard he discovered it, or if we're talking about the same person, he discovered it on accident.
Yeah, so his partner is, I only know him as Ram Dass. I always forget his American name because what happened was after their whole journey, they branched off and he became like basically like a fugitive because he's like running from, the cops. And
Timothy Leary.
so they were professors at Harvard, and they discovered basically the benefits of psychedelic drugs. LSD. Yeah. Okay. So they would hold these like study groups basically where they all tripped together, and then they that was their like research groups, and they discovered that LSD had that ability to almost like rewire the brain, right?
Right.
It had what do you call it? Potential to be used as part of the treating process when it comes to mental illness. And looking at the date here, when was this?
You can read it.
I want to say the 60s.
Yeah, 60 to 62.
Yeah. So in the 60s, they tried to move all of their research forward and they just kept getting blocked because you're thinking about, I think the war on drugs was later, but just society in general was not ready, I guess, for accepting this as a treatment. So they were like hated, they were both like fired eventually, I believe. And they, like I said, one of them was like, had to run from the police, and the other one went to India and basically met a guru and like found himself, started practicing mindfulness. Tim Leary, I believe, passed away, but, Ram Dass is still around. He's actually like I don't want to say just like spiritual leader, but he's like, he's like a guide. Yeah. And they talk about it. There's actually a study that was done as well when it comes to measuring pleasure expectancy. Oh my gosh, I have to think about the book, but I forgot the name of the book. Well, I don't remember the name of the book.
Anyway, by Timothy Leary?
No, it's a completely different book, but they measured pleasure expectancies of different activities, and were able to rate them from like, I don't know, like 0 to 10 or whatever. And like sex got 9, psychedelic drugs got 8, and the state that you reach in meditation got 10. So another reason, like another like question that is raised, like, is mindfulness important? Is being aware of oneself important? For
sure. And I feel like the people who do cater to a lot of other people, like look at comedians. I mean, how many comedians like kill themselves because they spend a lot of their life like making people happy, making people laugh. But turns out they were the most depressed people, like Robin Williams, right?
Yeah.
Who'd have ever expect? And I think I don't know how this would like pertain to our society on Guam. I think we do have a lot of mindfulness because we do care and we come from a very, very tight-knit society. I think that it's what it is what it's always going to be. It's to be nurture it, like continue to water it like a plant, right? Because eventually it'll die, but we can't save everything. Right? We're going to lose parts of some things that we're trying to save.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I guess I know what you mean. Yeah. Can't be attached to literally everything.
Yeah, we want to, right? Because now we're like consuming so much information. Like if you want that information, you can literally Google it and have it. It'll be in your hands.
But that's the thing is like we can't Google our own identity. well, I guess, for you, like for the Japanese side, there's probably more accessible information on Japanese history and stuff like that.
But the way my grandma was explaining, she would talk to me like, this younger generation in Japan, like they don't have any respect and stuff like that. But I never grew up in Japan, so I never really seen it.
Right.
But she was saying that back then in Japan was the same culture as Chamorro. The Chamorro culture, where you're very friendly with your neighbors and you leave your door unlocked and you just trust each other, and there's just like this family feeling. And when my grandma told me that, I was like, oh wow, there's so much like parallel,
Yeah, we're all Asian.
Yeah.
Right.
So when she was saying that our generation now has like zero respect, I was like, okay, so we're not the only one kind of going through that. I can't relate because I never lived there, so I don't know what to compare it to.
Right.
But the way my grandma was expressing it, I was like, oh man, so there's a part of Japan that's also losing its own identity and shifting into like what it is now.
Right. It's having to adapt. Society and culture is having to adapt to the change, to technology and what the change that technology is bringing. And we're not ready for that.
Yeah.
Because just in 2016, people were like, holy shit, we're losing it, right?
But wait,
Fastpack was the proof. Yeah. We were all in denial, but now, like when we were comparing it to 27 other nations, like, it seems like they're still like dancing around with their titties flopping out. That's cool. But that's the truth, right? Dude, everybody was freaking out when the community from the Marshall Islands were doing their dance and they were like, holy shit, the boobies are out.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's normal for them. You know what I mean? That's culture for them. Right? It's us because that's not our culture anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
But a lot of us, I personally, I want to be able to walk around without it. No, just kidding. Why not?
It's right. If you want to, then do it. But and society's gonna set that standard for us, for the individual.
Yeah.
Right. It's up to you to decide whether you give a fuck or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we all, as a collective, though, like have an influence too, I think.
For sure. Yeah, we're all influencing each other. Yeah. Just this conversation alone is we're
learning.
Yeah, we're influencing each other in thought. We're gonna leave like, oh shit.
Wait a second.
Tina said something that really really stuck with me. Right.
Yeah.
The beauty of a podcast.
Right.
You get to connect and learn so much from everyone.
Yeah. And I'm sorry I had to use the cultural dancers with their boobs hanging out. But
no, don't apologize.
That was the reality of it.
Yeah.
It's like, holy shit, take out my phone. Like, fucking take a video of this. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I've heard of people, like even some people that were representing the Chamorro culture, like not, being criticized for not being clothed enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Too. And it's just, that's crazy. It's crazy. But it's cool because then you get to, then you do start to question yourself, like, why do I think that that's weird and they don't think that it's weird?
Right. Yeah. It's always going to be, and people are going to probably listen to this and be like, nah, dude, Boo's fucking wrong.
That's okay, because people will listen to it and nah, dude, like, those two girls are wrong. Or just that one girl. What's her?
No, they probably listen to our podcast and like,
yeah, man, good thing you're not saying anything, bro. No, no, but it's every time you talk about culture, there's always going to be some sort of backfire because it's sensitive subject right now. It's so sensitive, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the realization that it was dying happened in the 90s, but
it happened before that.
Maybe before that.
Yeah.
But it was. I feel like it was still strong because when I grew up, I never questioned whether I was Chamorro or not. I knew I was Chamorro. In my heart, I was like, dude, 100% Chamorro, dude.
Rep that fucker sticker,
right? And that's what it was. And it took me having to uproot myself to figure out, like, oh shit. All right, who am I really?
I think for us to have the freedom to decide that, though, is so important.
Oh, of course.
Right?
Of course. But you can't blame it on any other generation. You can't blame it on other people. It's just now we have to take hold of who we are as individuals and sort of just run with it without any care.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
and what does that entail? If we do that, like, then what is required of us after that? You know what I mean? Like,
nothing. Self-satisfaction. That's why we live. We want to be happy.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
but I think it's just it's not turning into, but it is going to come with, and it has already started to come, especially when it comes to like deciding our status as an island. You know what I mean?
Right.
If we're going to own our culture, shouldn't we own the status of the island as well? You know what I mean?
What do you mean, like political status?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I think we deserve to determine what we want to be in the future, or soon, now, maybe. But guess what? The reality is it might not happen in our lifetime.
Yeah, but I think it's like if for me personally, if I sit back, I do my work, I'm in my path, I decide what's right and wrong for me. If I decide that it makes sense for us to honor the culture, then that's what is important to me.
For sure.
If that means if honoring the culture means honoring the land, that's important to me as well.
Mm-hmm.
If honoring the land means protecting our natural resources, and protecting our natural resources naturally leads to being able to decide what our political status is, especially if we have a big giant that's here already that has access to big portions of the land. For us to be able to have that conversation and decide and have the first input, seniority over what happens to those resources is so important. And I think it's the most important when you're talking about preserving culture, right? And I think that, yeah, it might not happen in our lifetime, but it's not necessarily a reason not to pursue it.
No,
you know?
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely not. I think we should be able to determine what direction we're going to take this place.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, as I mentioned earlier, dependency, there's different factors that we have to take into account.
Yeah.
I mean,
damn.
So many.
We really went for it. Shoot.
And it can be ultra overwhelming for just one person.
Oh God.
So and I'm to the point where it's like, fuck, dude, I'm just trying to be happy.
Yeah. And that's how do you balance that, right? Especially being in being here.
Yeah.
What about you, Akina?
How do I feel? I don't know. I was just absorbing and taking in everything that both of you were saying. And the first thing that came to mind was like, okay, so culture. And how much of our culture is influenced by our higher power? I'm not talking about like God or universe.
Oh, okay.
It's like who's politically the leader of that country.
Okay.
So for example, the first thing I thought about was that book, Massacre at Atati. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a passage in there which basically showcases when the Chamorros, they took their power back and then they killed these Japanese soldiers. And a Japanese soldier spoke in Chamorro and asked the Chamorro people, "Why did you kill me? I'm just following orders." And it shows kind of how the Japanese culture back then was ruled by, if the leader said, we're going to do this, no matter if you're against it, you're going to do it because that's your culture, is to like listen to the person who's elder or older, has more power, even though it's wrong, right? So it was that shift, and it made me think like, wow, how much of history is based on like how it unfolded because one person said, let's do this.
And everybody followed it.
Yeah, so the 99% is like, no, dude, let's not do that. But that 1%'s like, we're gonna do this. I'm like, okay, and that's how history started unfolding.
Right.
That's another question of like deviance as well. It's like how gullible is a huge group of people, you know what I mean? If you have the right person of authority that looks authoritative to say like,
or even in our media, clickbait, right?
Yeah.
So and so did this.
Right.
You know?
Influencers, quote unquote. Right.
Dude, like there couldn't be a more direct word. Like I'm an influencer.
Yeah. Right.
My question is, what are you influencing though?
Influencing the masses.
I'm influencing your likes with my sexy bag.
Yep. With my sexy back with the champagne glass.
Yeah. Just showing you my shoulder blade.
Look how bony my shoulder blade is.
Yeah. Look at my beauty mark.
Oh man. Oh. Okay.
No, I mean, and you're not wrong. I mean, a lot of decisions have been made by one person mainly, but is that a need for, is that a reason to not need organization or government? I mean, that's sort of like swaying towards like anarchist thinking.
Every man
right?
for himself.
Yeah. Like, why do I need government to tell me what to do and how to do it? Yeah, it's like
maybe I'm thinking from like really broad sense, and like when we were born, we weren't given a manual of how to live our lives and make the right decisions. So it's collectively looking, it's very interesting how each individual is a string of moments attached to like the person that they've met in their life. Hello.
With you too.
Yeah, part of my string.
Matt, how long have you been going here?
Yeah,
been going an hour.
oh wow.
Yeah, like that, huh? All right. Let's save some conversation.
Yeah.
I feel like we did. I really feel like we did touch on the identity thing pretty good. You know what I mean? You guys have different perspectives, completely different from mine, but I feel like we all went through the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Our stories about identity sort of converged, and we're handling it in different ways, and we're accepting of the ways that we decide to handle it, whether I put it at the forefront of my life or not.
Yeah.
And I think as society, for Guam to be able to survive whatever's happening here, to where we're not killing each other, right? Total civil unrest, and the government doesn't fuck up, but it's important that we're accepting of each other.
Oh gosh. Yeah, most definitely.
Definitely appreciate your podcast too, because your podcast itself opens that space for conversations.
Yeah.
You know, I think we do.
But you guys also opened your own space too, right? So, and that's a beautiful thing in itself.
Yeah.
So I think when people look back in this time and they're like, oh shit, let's go see what kind of podcasts we're going on from in the decade of 2010 to whatever, right? And they're gonna look back on this and they're gonna see how thoughtful we were, how mindful we were, right? And it could be a keystone in the evolution of what it means to be Chamorro. Not just podcasts, but media in general, right?
Podcast.
Yeah.
Dude.
Only our podcast, no one else's.
Yeah.
But it could be important, right? I mean, it's just everything that's going on, even in music and in art, right?
Yeah.
And people who now are entrepreneurs who freelance and kind of going from that norm and just kind of finding like, shit, I don't have to work 8 to 5 for real. I just gotta hustle real hard. Okay, let's see what's gonna take.
Yeah.
And it's easy to like be lazy because we're on Guam and we're not in a hustle environment.
Yeah.
You know, I have a friend who lived in the Bay, and he took us like around, and he was going. And also my friend who lived in LA is like, bro, I have no time to sit down or sleep or hang out. Like if I'm not moving and they're moving, I'm just getting left behind.
Yeah.
Right?
My friend actually brought that point up because in Bali, I will wake up at 5. I will meditate for 30 minutes. I will do personal writing for an hour and a half, and I'll get ready and go to my co-working space. I can't do that here.
Right.
I tried to set my alarm 5 o'clock. All for the month of June, I successfully woken up like 0 times. 8 a.m. And my friend brought up this point. She goes, why can you do it in Bali and you can't do it on Guam? Like, then, you know, I'm talking about like energy and space. She goes, no, really, why can't you do it? If you could do it in Bali, there's no reason why you can't do it on Guam.
Right.
So I was like, lit a fire under my ass.
Yeah.
It's environment.
Yeah.
And I think the culture, and God, I hate using the word culture because it's so broad, right? I can say culture and be like, oh, Chamorro culture, you know, but no, societal culture, like what's happening here. You know, it's to get the 9 to 5 job, right? It's to find work. It's not to create work.
Yeah.
It's to see opportunity, not create opportunity. But I think more and more people are starting to understand that, like, fuck, we have to create it.
Yeah.
It's definitely
Before someone else comes and fucking creates it for us, and then we're stuck working for them.
Yeah.
That's definitely shifting. I think technology is forcing that to happen anyway.
Of course.
Now we don't need left brain thinkers, we need more right brain thinkers, because everything can be sourced to a computer
Right.
at this point.
Yeah.
In Guam or in the States, anywhere
Yeah.
really.
You can work anywhere.
Yeah.
Look at John, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, John.
John's a prime example of being able to make a living and being here.
Yeah.
Right. And then travel when he wants.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's cool. It's like a fulfilling life, you know? It's cool.
And he's made it work for himself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Was it last year? Last year he was traveling and then lived in Boston for a bit, came back home.
That's dope. Remote work.
Yeah.
Seriously, remote work is the way to go.
So
Yeah.
it's doable, and I think people are figuring it out here
Mhm.
Yeah.
that we can do it, and thank God for
Yeah.
technology,
Yeah.
right? And whoever's bringing internet here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoever those people are.
Yeah.
I don't know them personally, so I can't
Thank you.
I can't credit them.
They can probably start.
yeah, right. So yeah, I think we as individuals all are vying for the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
whether you're a boy or a girl,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
or if you don't self-identify with any
Yeah.
of those,
Mhm.
right? We're still vying for the same thing. Is who are we, and what does it mean? Like, what does it mean to be here?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. I don't know.
'Cause you could
It's-
just say that, like, it doesn't even have to be about Guam at the end of the day. It could just be about just being on Earth. Like,
Right.
who are we? And
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, and it isn't, and it's a crazy thing because we leave Guam and we feel like we have to carry this representation on our backs, and sometimes even for maybe sports athletes, that can have an effect on their themselves
Mm.
Yeah.
because when they lose, they're like, oh shit, I let Guam down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm. Oh, I think that's a very healthy thing, though. You know what I mean? It's like,
It is, but it also goes back to self-love,
yeah.
right? You
Mhm.
really have to be able to do it for yourself,
Oh, God.
not for a community, or it'll eventually boil out to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But the core, and you guys been speaking it all along, it's
Mm.
like, I love yourself before you love others. You gotta care about yourself before you care about others.
Yeah, and I also think if you're so like, if you have such a huge aversion to that phrasing, you know, for me it goes back to, like, if we're all made up of the same stuff, you know, like, okay, you can call it loving the other everybody else, going through that work of understanding your own inner makings.
Yeah.
and getting to that point, because even as a creator, a content maker, whatever you want to pursue in life, how do you even know, like, what that is, like, without doing that work, right?
Right.
Mm.
Right. Never know if you don't try.
Yeah.
Right.
Never know.
Have you seen that Heineken commercial?
No.
Man, it was a really powerful commercial.
Really?
But they take two
Makes you-
opposing sides.
Uh-huh.
They meet in this room, and then in the commercial, the people, they don't see it, but they all have an interview. Like, one is against, like, LGBTQ, and then they're put in a room with someone who's
think I have seen
LGBT.
that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and they build a bar together.
Right.
Mm.
So they go through the stages and they get to know each other while they're building the bar. And at the end, they show the video of both opposing sides and said, you built a bar. If you guys want to sit and have a drink, then, you know, you're more than welcome to sit and have a drink, or you can leave the room.
Mm.
Yeah, so it was a really powerful commercial, and all of them just, like, put their differences aside and grabbed a drink and
Right.
hung out. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. And it just shows you that nothing that's going on around us doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, it's society tells us that it matters because we're constantly being forced to, like, see it, right?
Mhm.
Look at everything in the United States. Like, how much of I always question this personally, and I don't have an answer, is what is going on in the United States actually going on here?
Mm.
You know?
Mm.
Right? Is there
Oh,
like
man.
right? Is we right? I mean, it's heavy. Are
Yeah.
there real gender issues here?
Mm.
Are there real racial issues here? Yeah, we can say sure, but
Yeah.
how much so? Is it as bad as the United States? Is that what we're setting our bar to?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm.
We're trying to self-determine ourselves,
Yeah.
but yet we're constantly comparing ourselves to
Yeah.
what's going on in a
Out of-
bigger area.
Out of habit, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Oof, gosh.
because honestly, like, I don't, and with, like, the whole gender issue,
Yeah.
I don't truly believe there's a big gender issue, because my grandma was the best thing in my family. Both
Mhm.
my grandmas,
Mm.
Mm.
you know, so the respect towards women is on the utmost in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not so in the United States, because
Yeah.
people are cussing at their moms, you know.
Yeah.
I think for LGBTQ people, though, I think the gender issue is still very alive for them today.
Right.
So
For sure.
that's hard.
Yeah, and
a
it is.
conversation.
And yeah, I don't want to start putting in like opinions, because I don't really have a real one.
Yeah.
That's valid,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
least,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And it's heavy. It's those kind of questions will constantly like bear down on us, because we want to be our own people,
Yeah.
right? We want to be our own society, but we're constantly getting media from now around the world,
Mm-hmm.
and now trying to set ourselves to that same bar.
Dude, it's happening everywhere, though.
Everywhere.
When I was in India, one of my teachers just was so welcoming, and like she lived on the same street that my school was on.
Right.
And her and her sons lived in a small studio apartment, 2 teenage boys.
Right.
And she's a single mother. And she would come into school some mornings, and she would need to vent to us about what was going on between her and her sons. And at one point, one of her sons like ran away basically for the night, 17-year-old son. And she's crying about it or whatever. And then like a week later, she invited us over to her place for tea. Her son came in, both of them, and they both had iPhones and their headphones in. And you're looking around at the city that they live in. It's not America, but in their phones, this culture that they're being exposed to is so different from the culture that they live in, and it's creating this discordance, right? Now,
Very interesting.
the son is upset because he has a certain level of happiness that he can't attain living in the space that he actually lives in. His reality, his real reality is where he is, right? Physically. And there's just so much conflict between him and his mother at that point, because he's fighting that, you know? I don't know what's right and what's wrong, but that's a real thing. That's happening thousands of miles away. Where else is it happening because of technology, right? It's kind of cool to think about, really, you know, but dude, it sucks for like individuals. You know, like it's so hard.
Yeah, for sure. And to have to boil it into what a society is even harder,
Oh,
right?
gosh, yeah.
And I don't know. We'll save it for more conversations.
Yes,
I want you guys to be able to. I want to first thank you guys for coming on the show.
Thank you.
I feel like we were able to learn about each other. You know, me and Gilayna, we literally met for the very first time when we met for the podcast.
Yeah,
right.
Pretty
Wow.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we
So-
probably met a couple times in passing.
Maybe.
That's it.
But it's, you know, and she's my cousin, and I never knew she like existed, right? Until
Yeah.
we were talking, right?
Yeah.
So just to be able to learn about you more and learn about you, Akina, literally walked through the door and I met you.
Yeah.
That's why I love doing these podcasts, because we're able to share, you know, similarities and differences, and be able to share conversation. And I appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank
So
you.
as my thank you is to promote your show and put anything out on where people can listen to you guys, follow you guys. I know you have an active blog, right?
Mhm.
Even you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your own websites. Okay. So you guys have your own separate things, and
Yeah.
you guys sort of converge for Dear Gorgeous. And yeah. The floor is yours.
Oh.
Whoever wants to start.
No, really, thank you. Because when Gilayna and I first started, we're like, we didn't even know what equipment to get. It was, you know, it was really hard. And without your help, we probably would have taken longer to actually kickstart our podcasting. And we really appreciate you sharing and not being stingy with what you know, and, you know.
Yeah. You're, man. Oh, yes. Honestly, that one day was so insightful, and to see your setup, and to be able to text you like, hey, I'm thinking about ordering this, like, what do you think, you know? And you didn't seem bothered or nothing. And
No, she was really shy. I was with her. She
I was
goes,
so mamala. I texted Ty.
yeah.
I was like, hey, can you text Boo for me? Just because I know, you know, we don't really know each other on that level. So I just
Right.
felt I felt mamala. So thank you.
No,
honestly.
thank you. Thank you for reaching out. I really like to help people like jump on this journey, you know, because it's been like I told you guys, it's life changing for me, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
but enough about me. Promote your podcast. Promote your show. But you're welcome and welcome. All right.
Thank you. Well, you can find the show right now on PodBean, right? We're working on actually getting on other platforms, so just stay tuned on that. But on Instagram, you can, and on Facebook, Instagram and Facebook, you can find us at Dear Gorgeous Letters. That's our tag. Akina's website is
findafifth.com, and on Instagram, it's connected, so it's _findafifth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'm at gilaynajoy.com, and that's my tag too, is Gilayna Joy. Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Anyone sort of no?
If anybody has any suggestions for our next guest, like we're always looking for ideas and
so for our podcast we alternate, so every other Sunday we will have a G&A session where we talk about different topics, travel, mindfulness, anything that comes, and then in between the other Sundays we interview a gorgeous guest and they write a letter to our next guest.
Nice.
So it's a way of building a community within a community.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we had authors, we've had yoga instructors.
We'll have a filmmaker soon.
From Australia, but she has her family's from.
We had a content maker. But we really want to highlight. We talked like 2 hours about identity and stuff. Yeah. We do want to highlight the stories of women that call Micronesia and just the Pacific home, and Asia as well. So it doesn't matter if you're here locally or if you're anywhere else in the world. We'll interview you remotely.
Oh yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Thank
and
you.
Appreciate it. Or ladies. I shouldn't say guys.
Whatever. I'm a guy. I'm a guy. I'm a guy.
How rude of me.
It's fine.
People are gonna listen to this like, God damn, I just changed all my opinions about you. Said there's no gender issues here on Guam. There's no racial issues. People are gonna hate me. No. It's not that I don't think it doesn't exist. People.
Well, anyways, if they're gonna sit there and hate you for what you said, like, please, like, go ahead, but then like turn the conversation back on yourself, because you obviously have not done enough of your own self-exploration. Thank you.
It does exist. It's just not as crazy as the United States, as the mainland. I should point out. But anyways, thank you, ladies, for joining me on the show. I had tons of fun, and let's do it again.
Yes, for sure.
Okay. Absolutely. All right. Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of the podcast with Gilayna and Akina, and we will have them on soon. Episode 200 coming soon. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast if you're listening to this on the Apple Podcast app, and follow us on Patreon if you want to support us on Patreon. That's a good way to, like, I guess, be the podcast. I'll do this in the end roll too. So, but the most important thing for me is that you enjoyed yourself, and Maddie loves you. Matt, how much you love him, Maddie? Yeah, he usually says a lot more, but
thank you, Maddie.
Yes, and I love you, and until next time, peace out. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast with Gilayna and Akina from the Dear Gorgeous Letters podcast. I just want to give a special shout out to the sponsor, Addis Mortuary. They are a small family-owned and operated mortuary that's been serving this island community for over 45 years. They are large enough to serve, yet small enough to care. Don't forget to support us on Patreon if you aren't already. It's a good way to be a part of the podcast. Please leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast app or any platform that you can possibly leave a rating or review. That will be super awesome. You can kind of gauge how we're doing with the podcast. And finally, episode 200 is coming up very soon, and I am super excited. We are doing a live show, and thank you for being awesome all the time.